Okay, time for something a little bit different. I'm interested in all sorts of mechanical devices. Obviously my main interest is model steam engines, but pretty much anything that's mechanical, and particularly old, I'm interested in. And before anyone gets too excited about this is a deactivated firearm. It cannot be fired, nor can it be made to be fired. So we need to get that one out there right from the word go. And I'll talk about the deactivation later on. So what is this? Well, I'm fairly certain if there's any American people watching this video, they'll know exactly what it is. But for the rest of us, this is a Pietta replica of a Colt 1851 Navy Revolver. Now, Pietta are an Italian company. They make working replica firearms, so they make actual proper guns. But occasionally they also make some deactivated replicas, which is what this is. Now, there are many videos on YouTube showing the working versions of these revolvers being fired, and even amongst the Americans, they are fairly highly regarded. They're very reliable, they're very accurate, they're actually very well made weapons. So how does it hold up as a replica? Well, I've watched a whole load of videos on actual real 1851 Colts, and it's pretty good. I think it's pretty close. There's one significant difference. The real Colt 1851 Navies, they had a steel frame here. So this piece here and that would have all been steel. They had the back strap and front strap and trigger guard were, I believe, brass, but the frame, this frame here, would have been steel. Apart from that, I think it's pretty damn close, really. The replica is slightly heavier. The original gun weighed about 2.6 pounds, I believe. This weighs about 2.78. But that's not really surprising because, first of all, it's got a lot more brass on it, which is heavier than the steel. And secondly, there is a bloody great lump of steel in the barrel, plugging it up. So the barrel is not hollow on this. That's all part of the deactivation, which is obviously going to make it heavier. What else? It's 36 caliber, which is exactly the same as the original. The Pietta did make these, and I believe still do make them, in 44 caliber, but that's not historically accurate. All the Navy Colts were, to the best of my knowledge, 36 caliber. And for those of us out there who are not sure what that actually means, then there is a 36 caliber lead ball. That would be what this gun, if it was a live firer, would actually shoot. I'll put a £1 coin next to it and we'll have a quick look at that. That'll give you some idea of the actual size of the projectile that this thing would have fired. Now, interestingly enough, this was actually sold to me as a 44 caliber, but they'd obviously got that wrong and hadn't bothered to measure the chambers in the cylinder or the barrel, but it's definitely a 36. So I'm actually quite pleased about that because it's historically far more accurate as a 36 caliber than a 44 caliber. Now, some people, this gets very complicated. Some people believe that these Piettas are actually, they're actually replicas of Griswold and Gunnison copies of the Colt Navy. Now, Griswold and Gunnison were a Confederate arms manufacturer, and they made copies of the Colt for the South. And they made them with brass frames. And the reason they did this was simply because good quality steel was not readily available in the South during the American Civil War. So they tended to use brass where they could, because that was far more easily available. The problem I have with that theory is that every single picture or video I've seen of a Griswold and Gunnison copy of the Colt Navy has a round barrel. And this one, as you can see, has an octagonal barrel, which is what the Colt had. It had an octagonal barrel. So I believe that these are not that. I believe these are simply replicas of the Colt 1851 Navy And Pietta decided to make them using brass frames because they look prettier. I think that's probably the reason behind this. But I don't know. Who knows? I could be wrong. But let's have a closer look at it. So a little bit of history. Why is it called a Colt Navy? Well, that wasn't the official term for the gun when it was manufactured by Colt back in 1851. But they quickly became referred to as that because of the engraving that is on the cylinder. And I'll just bring that in closer for you so you can see. Now, I don't know how well that will come out on camera, but there is an engraving on the cylinder, and it is a representation of a scene from a battle between the Texas Navy and the Mexican Navy in 1843. That battle, and I apologise if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but that was the Battle of Campeche. That's, I think, how you say it. And that was engraved on the barrel by Samuel Colt. He had that done as a tribute to the people in the Texas Navy who used his weapons during that battle. So that's why it became known as the Navy Colt. They were in fact used by the Army. Civilians loved them because they were quite a lightweight sidearm for that period. So they were used. They're an incredibly successful gun for Colt at that time. Let's come back out again. So how is deactivation achieved? Well, there's various ways of doing it, and there are several features on this gun which have been applied for the deactivation. As I said earlier, the barrel is blocked, so if you stick a rod down the end of the barrel, it goes in for about an inch and then stops, and then there is a steel plug in the rest of the barrel, so you cannot obviously fire anything down that barrel. What else? The main components of the gun cannot be disassembled, and I'll explain how they've done that. And by main components, I mean the barrel and the cylinder. If we close in on that. Now, normally on these percussion cap revolvers, disassembly is very simple. This is a wedge which goes through a slot in the bottom of the barrel here, and it passes through the barrel, and then it passes through a slot that is in the arbor which the cylinder fits over, and that locks the barrel onto the frame. Well, normally you can just tap these wedges out. On an actual real gun, you'd be able to tap that wedge out, and then you'd be able to take the barrel off and the cylinder off. But on this gun, you can't do that, and I'll show you why. Now, I've removed the loading rod. You can disassemble part of the gun. You can take the loading rod off, you can take the grips off. But this shows you quite clearly why you cannot disassemble the rest of the gun, and I'll close in on the on what they've done here. Now, here you can quite clearly see the wedge protruding from the barrel here. What they've done is they've drilled a very small hole, probably about, I don't know, it's probably an 1/8 of an inch or so, up through the bottom of the barrel here, which passes through the wedge, and they've pinned it with a stainless steel or possibly a drill rod. Steel. This is very hard. I tried scratching this with a scriber and it won't even touch it. So, and this pin goes all the way up and it goes through the bottom of the barrel and through the wedge. So there's no way you can actually remove the wedge, which means that you cannot disassemble the gun, which is, again, is understandable because they don't want you to change out the barrel or the cylinder, because technically the rest of the gun is exactly the same as a live firing gun. And if you could change the barrel and the cylinder, you would have a perfectly operational gun. So there's two more stages that have been done to this gun. One I consider to be unnecessary, and I don't really know why they've done it. But the first one we're going to look at is completely understandable, and I'll come back out again, and then we'll go and have a look at the cylinder. Okay, I've turned the gun on its side and we're going to have a close-up look at the cylinder and particularly the chamber bores. I'll go in as far as I can, still remain in focus hopefully. Now you can't quite clearly see it with this light, but I'm going to put a torch on it, so hopefully this will show you what I'm trying to... I don't know whether you can see that, but inside the cylinders, the chambers have had a slot cut in them. You see that? Right through the chamber, through to the hole that runs through the middle, where the cylinder slides over the arbor. Let's come around the other side. In fact, you can see the arbor quite clearly through that slot that's cut in the inner side of the chamber. So if you were to try to load any powder into that chamber, it would simply fall through the slot onto, it would simply fall out through the slot onto the arbor and then out of the cylinder. So you can't load these with any kind of powder. So let's go back out again. And I will show you the last and rather strange modification that they've done. Right, let's swing it around. I'm going to put the gun on half cock. The cylinder is locked when the gun is like this, the hammer is like this. When you put it on half cock, you can rotate the cylinder quite freely. So I'll zoom in to the back of the cylinder. Now, in the back of each chamber, there is a hole. Now, normally that would be threaded. That's there, as you can see. Now normally that would be threaded and a percussion cap nipple would be screwed into that hole. Now obviously none of the chambers have percussion cap nipples fitted, and as far as I can tell, these, well, you can see quite clearly that these holes are not threaded. So they haven't even been threaded. Now, what I find strange about that is, I mean, obviously, there's no way you could possibly fire it without the nipples in place to take the percussion caps. But what I find strange about that is I've seen quite a lot of other deactivated Civil War revolvers, and all of them still had the nipples fitted. Because with all of the rest of what's done to the gun, having the nipples fitted is of you know, no consequence whatsoever. And the other thing is as well, because they're not fitted, you notice that straight away when you look at the gun. It's obvious, you can see that they're not fitted as soon as you look at it, and I think it kind of like spoils it a little bit, you know. But anyway, for whatever reason, they weren't fitted. So there you go. Let's come back out again. I just thought you would be interested to see those features with regard to the deactivation and how it's achieved. Now the gun has a very nice action. It's very smooth. It was a bit dirty when I got it, and I don't think it had been oiled in a long time, but I've cleaned it and oiled it as best I can, which of course is very difficult to do when you can't take the cylinder or the barrel off. But so that's half cock, and the barrel is free to rotate in that situation. Then you've got full cock, which brings the chamber into line. And now, whilst if this was a proper live firing gun, I wouldn't dry fire it, because you're not supposed to do that, because it's not good for the hammer or the nipples. But in this particular case, the hammer doesn't actually hit anything because there's no nipple there. So yeah, it's all very smooth, good strong spring. Yeah, it all performs very, very nicely. And it's well made. It's the action all works properly. It's really, really nice. Well, that's about it for this rather nice example of a replica Colt 1851 Navy. As I said, made by Pietta in Italy. Very, very nice weapon. And I can understand why the people that have the ones of these that actually fire like them a lot, because they're very, very, to my mind, they're very well made. The company's done a good job, and also, you know, it is again, to my mind, quite a good replica. Some people pick holes a little bit and they say that the back of the trigger guard is not quite the right shape, and this little heel that you've got on the grip is not quite the way Colt were made them, and that's true. There are some subtle differences, but apart from those things, it's a very, very nice weapon. Anyway, I just thought I'd show this for a change, something a little bit different to what I normally do. So there you go, Pietta Colt 1851 Navy deactivated replica. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers.